The story begins with a new police officer named Jessica Loren. On her very first day, she is deliberately sent for the night duty at an old abandoned police station. The entire station is deserted, with only one elderly constable, Patrick Black, present there. Patrick's very first words deeply disturb Jessica. He says, "As soon as night falls, something unnatural happens in the station, especially in that lockup. Don't go there no matter what happens." Jessica smiles hesitantly, a bit confused, but her mind starts to stir with unease. Patrick gives her a key and says, "This is the master key for the entire place, but never open that lockup." Saying this, he leaves without even looking back. Now the whole police station is in Jessica's hands alone. To pass the time, she starts reading a novel, but suddenly the corridor lights begin to flicker. She goes outside to check, but just then, the control room. Jessica asks the girl for her location, but the girl says she doesn't know where she is. And suddenly the call gets disconnected. Jessica immediately calls the headquarters, but they reply that all lines to that old building have been disconnected. "How did you even receive the call?" they ask. The headquarters promises to try tracing the call, but Jessica becomes a bit shaken. She picks up her book again to calm herself. Just then she hears a strange sound. The sound is coming from the direction of the lockup. Nervously, she walks toward it and sees a shadow running past. She checks every room one by one, but finds them all empty. She starts thinking maybe it was just her imagination. Just then, the phone rings again. It's the same girl, and this time she says her name is Monica. Before Jessica can ask anything else, the call gets cut again. Jessica calls the headquarters once more, but they don't pay much attention. They're beginning to think she's under mental stress. Just then, the cupboard behind her begins to move on its own. She turns around, startled, and checks it, but finds nothing. As soon as she sits down again, she hears a loud knock on the door, quickly reaches for her revolver, and tells him to leave. When he doesn't respond, she pulls out her police baton and slowly approaches the stranger. The man is sitting with his eyes closed. The moment Jessica lightly touches him, he screams loudly. This sudden reaction terrifies Jessica, and in anger she handcuffs him and throws him straight into the lockup. In all this chaos, she completely forgets that Patrick had strictly warned her not to enter that lockup. As soon as Jessica locks him inside, the door slams shut on its own. Within seconds, the lights go out. Jessica, now frightened, tries to open the door, but then a strange figure appears behind it. Seeing this, the torch falls from her hand, and she stumbles back in fear. But the scary events are far from over. Suddenly, the lights came back on, but two strange creatures were standing near Jessica. However, as soon as she looked closely, they vanished. It felt like everything was just an illusion, but the illusion felt no less real. Jessica immediately shut the lockup door and stepped outside, trying to collect herself. After all these bizarre incidents, she no longer felt like continuing her duty there. She thought of calling the station and resigning, but then she remembered how hard she had worked to get this job. Quitting on the very first day out of fear didn't seem right. She felt that if she gave up now, she might never get another chance. But perhaps that very thought would cost her dearly. Just as she leaned back to rest her head, her eyes fell on the ceiling. There were some words written there. Jessica was startled. She suspected that someone had broken into the station. She immediately ran around, locking all the doors. She had just begun to feel a little at ease, when suddenly strange noises started coming from one of the rooms again. She opened the door, but there was nothing there. As soon as she turned around, a chair in the room rose into the air by itself. She froze. It felt like someone was playing games with her. She was about to say something when there was no response. Now she began searching the entire station, and that's when she saw another police officer, Officer Ryan Pry. Jessica felt a bit relieved. She asked him, "Do you have any friends here?" Ryan replied, "No, I'm alone." Jessica became suspicious and asked, "Is this all part of a plan to scare new officers?" But Ryan said, "I was an old friend of your father. A year ago, we went out to capture a dangerous gang. Unfortunately, your father was martyred in that mission. I came here to see if you're doing okay or not." Hearing this, Jessica calmed down a bit. She said, "At least have a cup of tea." But the officer smiled and said, "No, I must go," and turned to leave. As he was walking away, Jessica's eyes fell on his head. There was a large wound, as if someone had shot him. Jessica was stunned. She ran after him, trying to stop him. But by the time she reached the corridor, the policeman had vanished. as if he was never there to begin with. Jessica was now completely shaken. At that moment, the most terrifying scene appeared. At the far end of the police station corridor, she saw a corpse standing. But the way the corpse was swaying, it looked like it was being held up by strings. Seeing this, Jessica's hair stood on end. She quickly hid in a nearby room and tried to calm herself down. After a while, she gathered courage, took a gun, and walked back into the corridor. But there was nothing there. She was still trying to make sense of what had happened, when suddenly she heard the screams of that prisoner in dirty clothes from the lockup. Jessica ran there. The prisoner was shouting at the door. And then Jessica noticed something even more horrifying. The corpses of 3 people were hanging in the air inside the lockup. But the very next moment, they vanished. Jessica tried to convince herself, it's all an illusion, just tricks of my eyes. Reassuring herself, she looked at the prisoner, smiled faintly, and returned to the duty room. She had no idea that a female spirit was following her. Jessica had barely taken a few steps when she felt something strange. She looked down at the floor. Nothing unusual. Once again, she convinced herself it was just her imagination and moved ahead. Just then, she heard music. The sound was coming from one of the station rooms. When Jessica reached there, she saw several women sitting in a circle, singing an old hymn. As soon as she entered, everyone's eyes turned toward her. Seeing this, Jessica's soul trembled. Now she was convinced that something was terribly wrong. She immediately called her senior officer and told him everything. But the officer mocked her and said, "If you're afraid of ghosts, then quit the police job and go home to do household chores." Jessica felt deeply hurt, but at that very moment, a determination awakened in her. "Now I will stay right here and see what these spirits can do," she thought. She hung up the phone and walked out of the station without looking back. Not to leave completely, but with the intention of observing from outside. But as soon as she stepped out, the duty room phone started ringing again. Hearing the sound, Jessica ran back inside and answered the phone. On the other end was the same girl who had earlier claimed to be Monica. This time she sounded extremely frightened and said, "I somehow escaped and am now hiding near a forest." Jessica asked, "Is there any landmark nearby?" Monica replied, "There's a signboard." Jessica immediately called headquarters from her mobile and shared Monica's location. She also told her, "Don't hang up the call." But just then, the call got disconnected. When Jessica informed headquarters about all this, what they told her sent chills down her spine. Monica had died a year ago. They explained that a year earlier, 3 brutal criminals had. When Jessica learned the entire truth, she was shaken to the core. As she stood lost in thought, suddenly a photo fell to the ground near the door. When she picked it up, she saw it was a terrifying picture from the time of her father's death. Immediately after that, dozens more photos scattered on the floor. All the photos showed the same people who had been brutally murdered by those 3 criminals. Seeing all this, Jessica felt dizzy and soon fainted and collapsed. It's unclear how long she was unconscious, but she was awakened by the sound of a phone ringing. When she answered it, she heard a woman's voice on the other end, introducing herself as Monica. Jessica asked in surprise, "Who are you?" But the voice kept insisting, "I am Monica." Jessica got angry and said, "What kind of joke is this? Monica died a year ago." But in response, a loud laugh came from the phone. And at that very moment, loud knocks began pounding on the table on their own. The next moment, Monica herself appeared and stood in front of Jessica. Terrified, Jessica stumbled and ran toward the record room. But the spirit crawled on the floor and followed her. Its face was disturbingly distorted, so terrifying that Jessica couldn't even muster the courage to look it in the eye. But the spirit hadn't come to harm her, only to scare her. In fact, Monica's death had been mysterious and tragic, and that's why her soul still couldn't rest in peace. She was venting her anger by frightening people. Out of fear, Jessica tried to open the main door of the police station to escape, but it seemed as if someone had locked it from the inside. In frustration, she pulled out her gun and fired at the glass. But shockingly, the bullet vanished the moment it hit the glass. Just then, the old landline phone in the station rang. With trembling hands, Jessica picked it up and heard her father's voice on the other end. She couldn't believe it, but it truly was her dad's voice. Tears flowed from her eyes. After talking for a few moments, her father comforted and encouraged her. His words gave Jessica new strength. But then something happened that shocked her. The man who was locked up in custody walked out from behind Jessica. She was startled. How did he get out? She immediately stopped him and ordered him to lie down on the ground. The man quietly complied. Jessica handcuffed him again, but as soon as she turned and saw his face, it was covered in blood. His eyes were red and terrifying. Seeing such a horrific face, Jessica took a step back. Just then, the entire police station's lights went out, and in the very next moment, the detainee vanished. Now Jessica began to realize that this was not a human being. This was something else. She ran to the custody room and opened the door. The real prisoner was lying there dead. Jessica looked at the walls of the room and saw something written on them. As soon as she tried to read it, darkness clouded her eyes and she began to see the 3 criminals. The same 3 whose souls still wandered in that lockup. As soon as the 3 were put into custody, they covered their faces with their own shirts and hanged themselves. These men were monsters in life, and even in death, they refused to rest. Just then, one of them suddenly removed the cloth from his face. His face was such that, for a moment, it didn't even seem like he could be a criminal. Seeing this, Jessica was terrified and immediately ran out of the custody room. But as soon as she stepped outside, she saw 3 men roaming around the station, staring at her. Without wasting a second, Jessica pulled out her service revolver and fired one shot after another. Her aim was so precise that 2 of them fell right there. Only one was left. Enraged, Jessica shot him too. But in the very next moment, something happened that shook Jessica to her core. The one she had just shot. He wasn't actually a criminal, but an elderly employee of the police station. The same one who often came to collect the trash. Jessica's eyes widened in shock. What was all this? At that moment, another senior police officer, Patrick, who was standing behind her, stared at her but said nothing. When Jessica looked back at the criminal, he appeared like an ordinary sanitation worker. No weapons, no cloth over his face. Jessica's mind went numb. Could it all have been an illusion? The truth was that the main criminal had a mental power. He could create illusions in people's minds. He would play such tricks on their brains that it became impossible to distinguish between reality and illusion. Perhaps Jessica was also affected by the same power. Thankfully, she survived, only slightly injured. She would recover after treatment. But the bigger question was, would she still want to serve at that police station? If you ask me, I'd say just tear that station down completely. And with this, the story ends here. We'll meet again next time with another chilling tale. Subscribe to this channel for more.